If you entered Solarpunk thinking it was just another relaxing survival game in the clouds, I'll tell you right now, there is a lot hidden here that the game simply doesn't tell you. And that is exactly what separates those who just survive from those who actually master the system. After quite a few hours testing mechanics, messing up builds, and optimizing everything to the max, I gathered 10 advanced tips that significantly improved my game. Some of them are the kind of thing that once you discover them, makes it feel like you were playing wrong before. So stay with me because these tips here aren't basic. They are the kind of advantage that makes a real difference in your progress. I'm Mary, and the video is about to start. One of the coolest things about Solarpunk is when you realize the game isn't just on the ground, it's in the sky too. Using the airship to explore other islands, and especially aircraft wreckage, totally changes how you find resources. In the beginning, you are limited to what you can produce, but when you start flying, the game practically rewards you for being curious. This wreckage is pure gold in the early and mid-game. That's where you find technical components that you simply cannot craft yet, and this can greatly accelerate your progression. Sometimes a single well-made trip gives you enough material to unlock or build things that would normally take hours. But you can't just go flying out unprepared. It's always worth getting ready beforehand. Bring food, make sure your tools are in good shape, and if possible, already think about what you actually need to look for. Because when you find a good spot, the ideal thing is to make the most of it without having to rush back due to a lack of preparation. Exploring the sky in Solarpunk isn't just a secondary activity, it's practically a progression strategy. The sooner you start visiting these distant areas, the faster you break through the limitations of the early game. And then, everything really starts to scale. If there is one thing that makes a real difference in Solarpunk, it's understanding early on how power works. It's not just about placing generators in any random corner and thinking it's sorted. The game sort of punishes you if you don't think about the structure of your grid. And when you start organizing it properly, everything just seems to flow better. I felt this in practice when I stopped improvising and started planning how the energy would circulate. The secret here is not to connect everything randomly, but to create a logic. Generators feeding batteries, and only then distributing to the machines. This reduces power loss in a very noticeable way. When you connect things directly without thinking, it feels like you're always short on power right when you need it most, especially when you start using heavier equipment. And that's where the most important point comes in. Some equipment simply doesn't work well without a stable grid. The drill, for example, consumes a lot, and the magnetic fishing system also requires a constant power supply. If your grid is messy, you will experience stuttering, power drops, or inefficiency. On the other hand, with well-organized wiring, everything runs smoothly, and that completely changes the rhythm of the game. Now, the truly advanced touch is using displays and sensors. This is something many people ignore, but it makes an absurd difference. Monitoring consumption and understanding where your power is going gives you total control of the base. When you reach this level, you stop just surviving and really start mastering the game's system. In the beginning, watering plant by plant even seems chill, almost relaxing. But after a few hours, it turns into a repetitive task that just locks you in the same place. When you connect the rain collector directly to the sprinklers, the game simply opens up. Suddenly, your crops keep growing on their own while you are exploring, gathering resources, or expanding your base. It's the kind of upgrade that doesn't seem crazy at first glance, but in practice, it completely changes the way you play because it takes a constant chore off your shoulders. The most interesting part is that this automation comes early enough to significantly impact your progress. It's not an end-game technology. It's something you can set up relatively early and start reaping the benefits almost immediately. And the larger your plantation, the more absurd the time savings become. What would take several repetitive minutes turns into simply zero effort. And that's just the beginning. When you reach drones and farm bots, that's when the game enters another level where practically all manual labor begins to disappear. But honestly, it all starts here. Rain collector plus sprinklers. If you do this early, you not only optimize your base, but you also gain the freedom to do what really matters in the game: explore and evolve. One thing I found very interesting is how the game treats animals in a way that is quite different from the survival standard. Here, it's not about exploiting or turning everything into a resource, but rather building a relationship with the fauna. At first, it might just seem like a cozy detail, but once you understand the system, you realize it goes much deeper than it looks. Interacting in a friendly way with animals really makes a difference. It's not just feeding them or letting them roam nearby, it's truly caring for them, keeping them comfortable and happy. And the game rewards this in a very organic way without feeling forced. You start to notice that certain behaviors change depending on how you treat them, and this creates a much more interesting connection. The pigs are the best example of this. When they're happy, they help find rare things like truffles, which can be extremely useful depending on what you are building or upgrading. And the coolest part is that this doesn't feel like a farming system, but rather a partnership. You care for them, and they help you naturally, almost as part of your base's ecosystem. In the end, this mechanic strongly reinforces the core idea of solarpunk: coexistence. It's not about dominating the environment, but living in harmony with it. And when you truly embrace this, the game completely changes pace, becoming much more strategic and even more rewarding than simply going out and gathering everything by yourself. If there is one decision that defines how fast you will evolve in solarpunk, it is the moment you prioritize the research table. A lot of people end up ignoring this at the beginning, focusing only on surviving and expanding the base. But the truth is, without research, you stay stuck in a slow cycle of progress. Building this table early completely changes the pace of the game. The interesting part is that the initial cost isn't crazy and the return is massive. Each unlocked technology opens doors to better tools, more efficient structures, and most importantly, automations that reduce manual labor. It's that classic investment that seems simple but starts scaling very quickly as you advance through the tiers. And here's the most important point. It's not enough to just build the research table. You need to use it strategically. Focusing on climbing tiers quickly is what really makes a difference. Unlocking more advanced furnaces, for example, accelerates all your resource production, while agricultural robots and drones begin to completely transform your routine inside the game. The research table is practically the heart of your progress in solarpunk. The sooner you understand this, the earlier the game stops being about basic survival and starts being about efficiency and expansion. And when that happens, everything begins to flow in a much more satisfying way. One thing I used to ignore at the start, but that becomes a game changer later on, is the weather station. It looks like just another secondary piece of equipment, but when you start paying attention to the weather, the game practically opens up a new strategic layer. I myself only started valuing it after realizing how much resource I was wasting unnecessarily. Knowing when it's going to rain, for example, completely changes how you handle your greenhouses. Instead of constantly wasting power on irrigation, you can simply prepare for the rain and let nature do the heavy lifting. This saves resources and makes your system more efficient, especially when your base starts to grow. Now, when it comes to power, the weather station becomes even more important. Since so much depends on sun and wind, forecasting these conditions allows you to better plan when to store energy or when to use heavier machinery. There were moments when I avoided a total collapse at my base just because I knew a period with no wind or low light was coming. And the most interesting part is when you start integrating this with automation. That's where the game truly shines. You can adjust entire systems based on the weather, almost as if your base were alive and reacting to the environment. When you reach this level, you stop just reacting to what happens and start anticipating, which gives a much more advanced sense of control within the game. If you are playing Solarpunk in co-op, one of the best things you can do is stop trying to do everything alone. The game even allows it, but when you start dividing roles, progress accelerates in an absurd way. I noticed this quickly. When each person takes on a role, the base simply evolves much faster and in a more organized manner. The fact that each player has their own inventory already helps a lot because no one is constantly relying on the other. But the real trick is using this alongside shared chests and a clear division of tasks. While one person handles the power, wiring, and automation side, the other can focus entirely on exploring the map, gathering rare resources, and bringing new seeds back to base. And this isn't just a matter of speed, but also of efficiency. When everyone tries to do everything, it ends up getting a bit messy. Resources disappear, projects are left half done, and no one specializes in anything. Now, when each person masters an area, you start to see better built systems and smarter decisions happening naturally. The coolest part of all this is how the game encourages real cooperation, not just playing together for the sake of it. It feels like each player becomes an essential piece within the base, and when the team fits well together, it gives you that feeling that you're not just surviving, but building something much bigger together. When you reach drones, it feels like the game finally reveals what it wanted to be all along. Up to that point, you've already automated a few things, but you are still very present at every stage. With transport drones, that truly changes. It's the moment your base starts running by itself, almost like a living machine. The big trick is using these drones to connect everything: greenhouse, furnaces, and storage. Instead of you constantly carrying resources back and forth, the drones take over that role and create a continuous production line. The flow of materials simply doesn't stop, and you begin to notice that the game stops being about chores and starts being about systems management. And the most interesting part is how this scales. The better you organize your base, the more efficient the drones become. Positioning, routes, and priorities start to make a difference. And you can even optimize transport times without needing to increase the number of drones that much. It's the kind of mechanic that rewards those who think a bit ahead. This automation with drones is easily one of the high points of the endgame. It's not just about comfort, it's about completely transforming the way you play. When everything is working in harmony, you practically step away from the operational side and become someone who just expands, improves, and watches the system run. And that feeling is just too good. One thing I find very important is not relying on a single power source early on. If you structure your base with redundancy in mind from the get-go, everything becomes much more stable later. The game makes it very clear that the weather influences production, so depending solely on solar panels or solely on wind turbines is asking for a tight spot. I like this approach because it reminds me to play smart, not just pretty. Solar panels work best on sunny days, wind turbines shine in windy areas, and combining this with batteries creates a massive safety net for the base. When you start storing surplus and distributing it with wireless cables, it feels like your grid stops being improvised and turns into a real system. The detail that makes the most difference, in my opinion, is accepting that the weather will dictate part of your production. On a cloudy or windless day, anyone who didn't prepare feels the drop instantly. Those who set up a mix of sources barely even notice. That is exactly why I always think it's better to plan early, because patching up an unstable power grid later is much more annoying than building it right from the start. And display panels close this logic perfectly because they show you whether your base is breathing easy or running on the limit. When you track production, consumption, and storage, you can adjust everything before it turns into a problem. For me, that's the most satisfying part. Feeling that the base isn't just working, but working with breathing room, as if you anticipated the game instead of chasing after it. One thing that can go unnoticed at the beginning is how much durability impacts your pace. Tools breaking in the middle of an activity or structures stopping work can delay everything, so having backups ready makes a big difference. It seems like overkill at first, but when your base starts to grow, it becomes almost mandatory. Another point that completely changes your experience is forming the habit of replanting trees. If you just go around chopping everything down, in no time you'll start lacking basic resources, and then the game slows you down. When you understand the cycle and maintain your own sustainable source, everything becomes more stable and predictable without those moments of scarcity that break the flow. And in the midst of all this, the survival guide ends up being more useful than it seems. It's not just a tutorial thrown in there, it's a quick reference that can save you time when you don't remember a detail or want to optimize a task. It's very much worth consulting instead of trying to solve everything through trial and error. Now, about food. Focusing on berries and raspberries at the start is a simple but highly efficient decision. They're easy to maintain, provide a stable survival foundation, and don't require complex setups. With this sorted, you take one more worry off your plate and can direct your attention to evolving your base with more freedom.